You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hi ladies, welcome to the Podclass. I'm so happy to have you. This is Alex here, and also Whiskey is with me as he is for many of our recordings, and I apologize because he snores a lot, but that's what it is. He will not tolerate me going into another room, so he's always just kind of taking a nap wherever I am recording for the most part. So I hope that you guys have been enjoying the classes. I know that they have ranged from really intensive on things to do and interpreting results and all of that stuff. So I'm hopeful that you are getting a lot out of this and that it's empowering your health and your life, and that you're starting to implement a lot of the cycle stuff. Today last time I talked about hormonal testing and all of the things that go into that. I talked about conventional testing versus functional testing and how we do functional testing and why we believe that's the best approach. But today we're actually going to go on to some results, because many of you, if I had to guess, are coming to us already having had some results. So you've been told, or you have a hunch that you may have things like estrogen excess or low progesterone or high cortisol, or you've been given some like adrenal fatigue stage 4 diagnosis. Whatever it may be, we wanted to address those because everyone always wants to know kind of where they are and what they need to do for that. And so we want to start talking about that stuff. So for this first one, I wanted to address cortisol, because everyone always kind of, for a while, adrenal fatigue was really kind of in vogue, and so many people were getting the testing, and then almost everything about our modern lifestyle predisposes us to increase cortisol requirements. I'll say it that way because we're going to talk about all sorts of cortisol details. But and so unless you are doing something special to support yourself, or you have very high reserves where you're just burning yourself out, but you're still you haven't tipped over into the symptomatic side of things, then it's way too common to have abnormalities. So almost everyone that has gotten tested has a problem with their cortisol in some way or another. And so lots of diagnoses flying around, lots of tools. We wanted to clear up a couple things and make sure that you had an understanding of what actually was happening. The adrenal fatigue term has largely been phased out just because it implies that the adrenals are burned out in a lot of these states, which was an old way of thinking, no longer believed to be true. So that has been phased out to HPA axis dysfunction. So that's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction, and that's the term most people will use because it's just a system that's not working together. It's kind of like an orchestra where each individual person is doing their own thing, and they might be perfectly good as a musician on their own, but if they can't play together, it's going to just sound like cacophony. So you want to address all of this in concert, which is why that HPA dysfunction term came about. Then for adrenal fatigue, HPA dysfunction, there used to be 4 different types, and it basically represented, the first type was imbalance, where your system's in stress, but you have enough reserve that you're not having symptoms yet. Then you tip over into stage 2, which is where your cortisol is actually always really high because your body's like, I'm just trying to hang on here. Like, there's so much stuff going on. I'm just going to ramp up production because let's like bang this out. We're going to get this under control. And then it gets to the point where it does that for a while and you lose all those reserves. And that was considered stage 3, where you essentially bottom out. And then stage 4 is a lower, more kind of advanced dysfunction that leads to the breaking down of all the systems that interface with the adrenals. That concept does not seem to be true because we have found that not everyone goes through the stages in a stepwise fashion. Some people go directly from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. I mean, you can really have a trajectory that looks different. So we have changed our thinking about that. And essentially what we have started looking at, at least in the functional world, is looking at the cortisol curve throughout the day, which is why when we use our preferred test, the Dutch test, there's 4 to 5, depending on if you get up at night, 4 to 5 different points of testing. You do 4 or 5 samples, and then you get a curve for the day. That's your cortisol curve, and then you can compare that to the quote-unquote normal curve of people. And then it also, that is just one thing, because the creation of metabolism is only one part of how we actually feel our cortisol states, because on one hand you have to make it, but then you also have to metabolize it. There's always this metabolism portion that will impact how we feel, and we'll talk about metabolism in each of the following pod classes, because you need to not only know just a raw number and how it compares to the regular curve, but you have to know what's happening after that is created, because things can really, if you can imagine it like if you were just constantly taking out the trash, but there was never a truck that came by from the city to pick up the trash, you would just have a bunch of trash, right? Or if someone or vice versa, where you didn't have enough trash in your house to take out, but the garbage man is parked out back yelling like, hey, I need the trash, to come take out the trash. So that is just a really quick example, obviously, and it's a little silly, but you can see how what happens after you just make the thing also impacts what our experience in the world actually is. And so that is that. So you can have 4 different cortisol patterns. You can have high cortisol that is in the bloodstream, and then you can have high metabolized cortisol. So you make a lot of cortisol and you have a lot of it available for use. Okay. The second pattern is basically the opposite. You don't make a lot of cortisol and you don't have a lot available for use. Okay, so those are they're both high metabolized and free cortisol, or they're both low metabolized and free. Then you can have kind of a combination of high or low. You're either making a lot, but you don't have a lot available, which means that you're just using it up. It's disappearing really quickly. That's called clearance. Or you can have the opposite, where you are not making a lot, but it's sticking around for a long time, so you have a lot of it available to you. So that's low metabolized cortisol and high free cortisol. And that talks about sluggish clearance of cortisol, and that generally we start thinking detox. All right, so that is the current model that we have. So in our Dutch lab work, that is the information that we get on somebody about cortisol, and then we can also check out all of the, what's happening with estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, which we'll talk about in later pod classes, and then get a picture going of why we think that's happening. Generally, when you have high everything, so high metabolized, high free cortisol, it's because your body is in this amped up state. And so it's just like there's usually points to something triggering this, whether that's really high stress levels, a gut infection, some sort of, poor glucose metabolism. All of those things will set this up, and so your body's in like go mode. And then for the low of each, free and metabolized, you're basically just that's how, when people have this, how they tend to describe themselves as depleted. It's like you can't quite get excited about something. You're just like, I'm so tired. I'm like, can't even get excited about this trip that we're going on. Or like, there's just low motivation at work. There's just depleted. Like, no matter how much sleep I get, I just want to sleep more. Like, you're just fatigued. And if you've ever had severe fatigue, this really, really is uncomfortable. And when people come to us with that, generally that's what their labs look like. Like we can predict based on what someone's telling us what they're going to look like. The mixed ones, where you're the first one we'll talk is you're making a lot of cortisol, but you don't have a lot available, is usually, again, something that's causing you to kick into overdrive and all of those factors. And then low metabolized cortisol and high free cortisol, which is where you're not making a lot and you have a lot available, is generally something that is limiting you from getting rid of it. And so that can be things like, poor detoxification systems, heavy metal toxicity, stress and cortisol basically should be linked in your mind, because in all four of these patterns, stress can cause it, because we're not built to sustain the level of current stressors that we have. And that's when we say stress, our view is limited. It's not like, just a deadline at work. It could be an actual, like, nutritional deficiencies are a form of stress. Too many toxins are a form of stress. Autoimmunity is a form of stress. Inflammatory foods, like food allergies or sensitivities, are a form of stress. You name it, it can be stressful to the body. Even like people get alarm fatigue and their cortisol will spike, which is like your phone keeps going off and you keep getting emails and you keep getting, like, for me, I also have a pager and a work phone, and when there's like 12 things going off every 5 minutes, that is like stress, and your body is essentially like, why are my ears getting activated all the time? Like, what is happening? And that will go on to, the body reads that as a signal. That's why noise pollution and light pollution are actually talked about, because our bodies are not yet evolved to deal with these outside factors without perceiving them as a stress. My hunch is that we will all continue to evolve in the world that we live in, and that we will have changes over time that will better equip us. That has not happened yet, though. So, and who knows what's going to happen. So in the meantime, we have to mitigate these stressors coming in. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I didn't think of it that way, begin to consider a broader definition of what stress can mean to you. And you likely have a hunch of what your stressors are. Some people will say, I have no idea. I feel like I do everything perfectly. But then you start to talk to them and, their relationship, right, one important relationship in their life isn't that great right now. And, they don't really feel that good about themselves. Like, they're always wondering if they're, they're close to their ideal weight, but they're not really, and they're unhappy about it. And they're still searching for answers for why they feel how they feel. And you start talking to them and you really begin to see that the mind is really powerful. And that's why we get the neurotransmitters to go along with the Dutch test, is because we need to know what's going on and what imbalance is feeding some of these cortisol patterns. But at the same time, the most powerful thing that you can do is to manage the stressors that you already know. And so be very honest with yourself and take a beat and let yourself journal over the period of days, weeks, hours, months. It doesn't matter. But be real honest with yourself about what your stressors are that are feeding your life and how your beliefs feed into that. Because again, we talked about this in the meditation and journaling pod classes, but if your belief is that the world is hard and that people are mean, it's really hard we'll see that in your neurotransmitters. Like some people are just you can tell that they're like, I always feel on edge and like people, like I'm always watching out for something bad to happen. And that's exactly what their labs will look like. They just look like they're like high cortisol, high metabolized cortisol, high, like high everything. And they're just like super on edge all the time. And so be honest with yourself. And begin to take note of your experience, knowing that there's physiology to back this up. And it gets really interesting because you can be very, very powerful with just that knowledge. Just that knowledge alone can transform your life into something healthier and more enjoyable for you to be in. So think deeply about that, spend some time, and know that when you get testing, it will likely reflect what you already feel. All right, ladies, I am going to head out, and come see me again for the next one. We'll talk about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone coming up. So come hang out with us over on Instagram, zesty_ginger, or shoot us an email, support@zestyginger.com. All right, ladies, have a good one.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this Podclass. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.